Imagine waking up 30,000 years ago, not to the sound of an alarm, but to the smell of cold morning air and someone nearby feeding the fire. Children are already awake. You hear people talking, someone laughs. It's just another ordinary morning. No phone, no emails, no work, no school, no cities, no money. Just another day. What would you actually do? Most people imagine ancient humans spending every waking hour trying not to die, running from predators, hunting mammoths, searching desperately for food. But archaeologists think that picture is almost completely wrong. In fact, your average Tuesday in the Stone Age might have been surprisingly familiar. If Hollywood has taught us anything, it's that ancient humans were always hunting. Every movie shows the same scene: a group of men with spears, running after enormous animals, fighting for survival. It makes for great cinema, but probably terrible history. Large hunts were incredibly dangerous. A single mistake could mean a broken leg, or death. And unlike in movies, there was no doctor waiting back at camp. That's why people didn't hunt mammoths every morning. They simply couldn't afford to. Instead, most days looked much less dramatic. People gathered berries, dug up roots, collected nuts, looked for honey, caught fish, picked shellfish, trapped rabbits, collected bird eggs. Thousands of tiny meals instead of one giant adventure. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherers have found that a large part of their daily food often comes from gathering rather than spectacular hunts. A mammoth was unforgettable. A handful of berries wasn't. Guess which one appears in movies? Even after a successful hunt, people didn't immediately head back out the next morning. One large animal could feed an entire group for days, sometimes even longer if the meat was dried or smoked. Which means something surprising. Ancient humans probably spent much less time hunting than we spend watching documentaries about hunting. The famous mammoth hunt wasn't everyday life. It was the exception. So if they weren't hunting all day, what exactly were they doing? Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. If ancient humans weren't hunting all day, were they simply struggling to survive? Surprisingly, not always. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies discovered something that challenged one of our biggest assumptions. On many days, people spent only 3 to 5 hours getting food. Not 12, not 16, just a few hours. The rest of the day was filled with very different activities. They repaired stone tools, made clothing, collected firewood, wove baskets, cared for children, visited neighboring families, talked, laughed, rested, or sometimes did absolutely nothing. That sounds almost impossible. After all, if life was so dangerous, shouldn't survival have been a full-time job? Not necessarily. Hunter-gatherers weren't trying to maximize productivity. They were trying to meet today's needs. Once everyone had enough food, there was often little reason to keep working. But why not collect enough food for an entire week? Because carrying tomorrow's dinner wasn't always an advantage. Most food spoiled quickly. There were no refrigerators, no freezers, no airtight containers. Fresh berries lasted only a short time. Meat attracted insects and scavengers. And there was another problem. Many hunter-gatherer groups were constantly moving. Everything they owned had to travel with them. Their tools, their clothing, their children. Extra food meant extra weight. Extra weight meant slower travel. Sometimes the smartest decision wasn't carrying more. It was carrying less. Unlike modern jobs, working longer rarely produced a better life. In fact, wandering farther often wasted precious energy and increased the risk of injury. The goal wasn't to become rich. The goal was simply to have enough, which completely changes how we imagine prehistoric life. Today, millions of people spend 8 or 10 hours every day at work. Some Stone Age communities may have spent less than half that time simply getting what they needed to survive. So if they weren't constantly working, what filled the rest of their day? If people weren't hunting, and they weren't working all day, what filled those long afternoons? One answer may sound surprisingly familiar. They talked. A lot. Anthropologists believe conversation wasn't just entertainment, it was one of humanity's greatest survival tools. Imagine living in a group of 30 people. You need to know: who found honey yesterday? Where were wolves seen? Who's injured? Who's the best hunter? Who can be trusted? Who can't? None of that information comes from hunting. It comes from conversation. Some scientists have even proposed a fascinating idea. Language may have evolved partly because humans became too social for grooming. Chimpanzees strengthen friendships by picking insects out of each other's fur. It works, but only one friend at a time. Humans found a much faster solution: conversation. With words, one person could strengthen relationships with an entire group at once. In a way, gossip replaced grooming. That may sound funny, but gossip isn't just talking behind someone's back. It's information. Who's reliable? Who's generous? Who's selfish? Who's brave? Knowing those things could mean the difference between life and death. So around the fire, people probably didn't spend every evening discussing mammoths. They told stories, joked, argued, shared news, exactly like we do today. Which leads to another surprising question. If evenings were filled with stories, could that be where human culture itself began? The sun disappears behind the trees. The day's work is over. Someone adds another branch to the fire. Children move closer. The oldest hunter in the group picks up a stick and begins drawing in the dirt. He sketches a river, a cliff, then a herd of deer. He points to one narrow gap between the rocks. That's where the animals passed last winter. A teenager watches every movement. One day, he'll need to remember this without anyone helping him. Nearby, a woman is showing a little girl which berries are safe to eat and which ones nearly killed someone years ago. Across the fire, two hunters are laughing. One is exaggerating the size of yesterday's wild boar. Everyone knows he's lying. Everyone laughs anyway. Then someone tells a story. Not because they're bored, but because stories are easier to remember than instructions. Never sleep near the river. Don't follow a wounded bison into the forest. Always look behind you before entering a cave. Generation after generation, knowledge survives because someone keeps telling the story. No books, no maps, no classrooms. Just people sitting around a fire, talking, listening, remembering. Some anthropologists believe moments like these changed human history more than any mammoth hunt ever did. Because once people could pass ideas from one mind to another, they no longer had to learn everything the hard way. Every child inherited thousands of years of experience, simply by listening. Maybe that's the biggest misconception about prehistoric life. We imagine ancient humans constantly running from danger. But most days, they were simply living, raising children, fixing tools, laughing at the same joke for the 10th time, listening to someone who always made every hunting story a little bigger than it really was. If you quietly sat beside their fire for one evening, you probably wouldn't feel like you'd traveled to an alien world. You'd feel like you joined another family, separated from yours by 30,000 years.